Okechukwu sat on the edge of the bamboo bed, his hands trembling as he wiped sweat from his face. The room smelled of dried herbs and burnt offerings. A single kerosene lantern flickered near the clay wall, casting long shadows that danced like ghosts. He could hear his heart thumping louder than the distant crickets. Just 2 days before, he had promised Amaka, his wife of 8 years, that he would find a way to end their suffering. "We will not die poor," he had told her, brushing the tears from her eyes. And now, as he waited for the dibia, the herbalist, to return, Okechukwu wondered if he would ever sleep peacefully again. When the dibia finally stepped inside, his bare feet made no sound on the packed mud floor. His face was painted with white chalk, and around his neck hung a string of dried bones. He smelled of something bitter and rotten. Without a greeting, he went straight to the calabash at the center of the room. Inside it was a dark liquid that looked like thickened blood. "Have you decided?" the dibia asked, his voice a hoarse whisper that scraped Okechukwu's ears. Okechukwu nodded slowly, feeling bile rise in his throat. He had decided. He would trade the life of the woman who had loved him when he had nothing. That night, Okechukwu lay beside Amaka, listening to her soft breathing. Her body was thin from hunger, her skin dull with exhaustion. Yet she still pressed her cheek to his chest, murmuring, "I believe in you." Her words struck him like a blade. He almost pulled away, but then he thought about the shame of their poverty, the mocking neighbors, the creditors who pounded on their door. The nights he lay awake imagining his children dying slowly because he could not provide. He told himself he was doing this for them. That lie became a chant in his head until it drowned out every last shred of guilt. 2 days later, Okechukwu returned to the dibia's shrine. The sun was sinking behind the palm trees as he handed over the white cock and the strands of his wife's hair he had stolen while she slept. The dibia cracked the cock's neck, letting the blood spill over the calabash. He mixed it with a bitter powder and stirred with a carved horn. Then he lifted the concoction and blew a mist into Okechukwu's face. "When the moon is full," the dibia intoned, "you will lead her here. You must not look back. You must not call her name. If you do, your own blood will answer." The night of the ritual, the moon hung heavy and red, like an omen. Okechukwu woke Amaka with a gentle shake, telling her he needed help fetching medicine for their sick son. She rose without complaint, tying her wrapper and following him into the bush path. The walk felt endless. He could feel her trust clinging to him like a bird. At the clearing, the dibia waited by a pit lined with black stones. "Go back," a voice inside Okechukwu screamed, but he swallowed it. He turned and walked away, never daring to look over his shoulder as the dibia began chanting. He tried to close his ears to her cries. When he returned home alone, the hut was filled with silence so deep it hurt. His son, Chika, stirred on the mat and asked where Mama was. Okechukwu's mouth opened, but no words came. He knelt and hugged the boy fiercely, his tears soaking the child's hair. That night, he could not sleep. Every rustle in the dark sounded like Amaka's voice calling to him. Still, when the cock crowed at dawn, he told himself it was done. The dibia had promised wealth beyond imagining. Soon he believed he would bury his sorrow in a flood of riches. The transformation began almost immediately. A week after the sacrifice, Okechukwu found a small leather pouch under his pillow, heavy with gold coin. He nearly collapsed when he held it. The next day, a stranger appeared in the village, offering to buy Okechukwu's farmland for a price so high it made his head spin. He accepted without hesitation, telling himself this was Amaka's last gift. He bought new clothes for Chika and hired men to rebuild their crumbling house. When people asked where Amaka had gone, he said she had traveled to care for a sick relative. Word spread quickly that Okechukwu had come into sudden fortune. Some said he had found hidden treasure. Others claimed he had charmed a wealthy widow. Only the dibia knew the truth. And late at night, when Okechukwu lay alone in his big new bed, he also knew the truth and nothing he owned would ever fill the emptiness in his chest. He tried to comfort himself by imagining how proud Amaka would have been to see Chika fed and clothed. But in the darkness, he could still hear her last scream echoing among the trees. Months passed. Okechukwu's wealth multiplied. He built a blockhouse with glass windows and painted the walls sky blue. He bought a motorcycle and rode it proudly through the village. Yet the more he gained, the more he felt something rotting inside him. His nights were haunted by nightmares of Amaka's face, pale and streaked with tears. During the day, he sometimes thought he saw her standing by the roadside, her wrapper fluttering in the breeze. Whenever he blinked, she vanished. The dibia had warned him not to look back, but he hadn't realized how long the past could follow a man. One rainy evening, as Okechukwu sat on his veranda counting his money, Chika came running in soaked to the bone. "Papa," he panted, "I saw Mama." Okichu's heart stopped. "Where?" he rasped. Chika pointed toward the old shrine path. She was standing there, Papa. She was crying." Okechukwu slapped the boy hard across the cheek. "Don't ever say that again," he shouted, his voice cracking. Chika burst into tears and fled to his room. Okechukwu pressed a trembling hand to his chest. It felt as if something cold had wrapped itself around his heart. That night, the storm raged without mercy. Wind howled through the trees. The roof creaked and shuddered. Okechukwu lay awake, clutching a pillow to his chest. Around midnight, he heard it, the voice he could never forget. "Okechukwu, why?" The walls seemed to breathe. He buried his face in the pillow, but the voice grew louder, seeping into his bones. "You promised we would never die poor. You never said I would die alone." He screamed into the darkness, "Leave me alone!" But there was no reply, only the storm and the feeling that the night itself was watching. By dawn, Okechukwu's hair had begun to turn gray. Neighbors whispered that he had fallen under a curse. His skin grew pale, and his eyes lost their shine. The wealth he had traded for Amaka's life felt like poison in his hands. Still, he refused to confess. He told himself that if he could just endure, if he could stay alive long enough, he would find a way to cleanse himself. But every time he tried to pray, he heard Amaka's cries echoing in the rafters. The final blow came 3 months later. Okechukwu woke to find Chika burning with fever. No matter how much money he spent on medicine, the boy only worsened. In his delirium, Chika called for his mother again and again. Okechukwu sat by his side, clutching the small hand that felt as thin as a bird's wing. "I'm sorry," he whispered over and over. "I'm sorry." But the apologies tasted hollow. The wealth he had killed for could not buy forgiveness, or peace, or the return of the woman who had been the heart of his home. On the morning Chika died, Okechukwu felt something inside him snap. He wandered into the bush path where the ritual had taken place. The pit was still there, half filled with rainwater. He fell to his knees, staring into the muddy water until his reflection blurred and vanished. "I did it for you," he whispered to the emptiness. "I did it for all of us." But the wind carried no answer, only the rustle of leaves. He sat there until dusk, when the first stars began to pierce the sky. Then he rose, feeling weaker than he had ever felt. That night, as he returned to the empty house, Okechukwu clutched his chest and collapsed. The neighbors found him at dawn, his lifeless hand still clutching a gold coin. The wealth he had sacrificed everything for remained stacked in neat bundles beside his bed, untouched. At his funeral, the elders shook their heads and whispered that a man who traded blood for riches would never truly prosper. In the end, no one could say whether Okechukwu had died from guilt or from the curse he had invited into his home. But everyone agreed on one thing: he never got to enjoy the fortune that cost him his soul.
Please like, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more exciting, lovely, and interesting stories.